My name is Grace Whitmore. My son looked me in the eyes and told me everything was fine, but the moment he blinked, I knew he was lying. That blink destroyed the woman I used to be. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It started with silence. Not the kind of silence that feels peaceful or mutual, no. This was the heavy kind. The kind that hangs between two people like thick fog waiting for someone brave enough to speak through it. My son Caleb had just walked in the door. He was 29, still lived with me while saving for his own place. It was just the two of us now since his father, my husband, traveled so often for business. I never asked too many questions about that anymore. Not because I didn't care, but because, well, when you've been married for 32 years, you learn what not to ask if you want to sleep at night. But that night, something in Caleb's eyes didn't belong. He had this shadow behind them, like he'd just come back from seeing something he was never meant to witness. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying not to sound like a mother hen. "Yeah," he muttered, kicking off his shoes. "Just tired." He didn't meet my eyes. That was the first alarm bell. Caleb always met my eyes. He'd been an honest kid sometimes, painfully so. He told me when he failed a test when he kissed his first girl when he thought Dad was too hard on him. But lately, he'd gone quiet. Too quiet. And now his silence felt sharp, as if the truth was trying to slice its way out of his throat, but he was holding it back. "Did you eat?" I asked, still watching him. He nodded, then said, "Don't wait up. I'm heading straight to bed." Then he was gone. Up the stairs. Door closed. I stood there holding a dish towel in my hand, feeling suddenly profoundly alone. I didn't sleep that night. Not because of Caleb's silence, but because of what it reminded me of. His father Daniel had once come home with that same look years ago. It was the night after his company retreat. He had hugged me a little too tightly, asked about the kids like he hadn't seen them in years, and then kissed my forehead without saying a word. And I'd let it slide. I told myself it was stress or fatigue or travel. Maybe that's how betrayal works. It doesn't come in like a storm. It seeps in like dampness growing in corners you don't check until the floorboards rot under your feet. The next morning, Caleb was gone before I woke up. He left a note on the counter. "Early meeting. Don't wait on me. Love you." But the ink was shaky. I held the paper in my hands and stared at it longer than I should have. Something was off. Again. At first I considered the obvious drugs, a bad breakup debt. But Caleb didn't date. He worked hard, he didn't go out. He was quiet, maybe even dull, but not secretive. Not until recently. I started to wonder if it was something to do with Daniel. Something between father and son. I didn't want to go there. I had made a pact with myself years ago: protect Caleb, even if it meant protecting him from the truth. But now I felt like I was the one being protected, or worse, excluded. That evening, I heard it. A voice. Caleb's voice. He was on the phone in his room, speaking low. So low I couldn't make out the words, just the sound of fear and urgency in his tone. I wasn't eavesdropping. Not really. The walls in this house were thin. And when you raise someone, you recognize their fear before they even say the words. I crept halfway up the stairs. Listened. "I can't keep doing this," he whispered. "She's starting to notice." A long pause. I know what we said, but I didn't think it would go this far. Another pause. His voice cracked. "She deserves to know." I froze. He wasn't talking about a girlfriend. He wasn't talking about some mistake. He was talking about me. When he came out of his room later, I was sitting in the living room, lights dimmed, pretending to read. "Hey," I said softly, not looking up. "Hey," he replied, already inching toward the kitchen. "You okay?" He stiffened. "Yeah. You." I turned the page. "Fine. Just, I had a dream about your sister last night." He paused. "Yeah, yeah. She was little, had that pink scarf she used to drag around everywhere. Remember? He nodded slowly, then came to sit on the arm of the couch. I miss her too, he said. That's when I looked up. He wasn't crying, but his eyes were glassy like the dam was just barely holding. You can tell me anything, Caleb, I said. He blinked. Then he smiled just slightly. Not a happy smile, a sad one. The kind you give someone when they don't know what's coming. I know, Mom, he said. I know. But I could feel it, the wall between us. Something was brewing behind that smile, and when it finally broke, I didn't know what would survive. That night I stood outside his door for a long time just listening. Listening for a whisper, a clue, anything. But all I heard was silence. That silence was the beginning of the end. I just didn't know it yet. Caleb had always been the quiet one, but ever since that night, the one with the phone call, the one where he whispered, "She deserves to know," the silence between us had shifted into something colder, something calculated. He avoided me in small ways. Left earlier in the morning, ate dinner at odd hours. His bedroom door was closed more often than not, and when I passed by, I'd hear the faint click of him locking it as if I were some stranger who might barge in with questions he couldn't answer. The worst part, I didn't even know what to ask. I became hyper-aware of everything. The way his shoulders tensed when I mentioned his father. The way his eyes flicked toward mine when a news anchor on TV mentioned financial fraud. Even the way he laughed, forced short like his lungs didn't want to commit. One night I was walking past his room when I heard it again. A whisper, but not his. There were two voices, low and urgent. I leaned in. My hand trembled as I gently pressed my ear against the door. The voice on the other end of the line was male, deeper, slower. Not Daniel's, but someone familiar. I couldn't place it. I heard Caleb say, "I'm trying, okay. She's getting suspicious." The other man responded, but the words were muffled. Then Caleb said something that chilled me to the bone. "If she finds out the whole thing, it's over. For all of us." I backed away from the door so fast I nearly tripped over the hallway rug. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on the edge of my bed in the dark, staring at the wedding photo still on my dresser, Daniel and I on our wedding day. His hands firm on my waist. That forced but convincing smile. And beside it, a photo of Caleb and his sister when they were 10 and 8, laughing in a pile of autumn leaves. That was the last fall before she changed, before she got quiet too. It hit me then. This wasn't just about Caleb. Or Daniel. Whatever this secret was. It had started a long time ago. The next morning, I stood in the kitchen holding 2 mugs of coffee. When Caleb came down, I offered one without a word. He hesitated, then took it. We sat across from each other in silence for a full minute. Then I spoke. "I heard you on the phone last night." His eyes flicked up just for a second. "Oh, you were whispering," I said. "Is everything okay?" He sipped his coffee too quickly and burned his lip. I could see the twitch. "It's just work stuff," he said. I didn't break eye contact. "You said she's getting suspicious. Who are you talking about?" He blinked slowly. Then came the lie. "My manager. She's paranoid. Always thinks I'm about to quit. That's all." It was practiced. Not smooth, but practiced. Like he'd been expecting me to ask. I didn't press. I just nodded. But inside something broke. My own son, the child I raised, held through nightmares, defended from bullies, had prepared a lie in case I caught him. That kind of lie doesn't come from nowhere. That afternoon, I went to the attic. It wasn't logical, not really. But something inside me, some aching instinct, told me to look. It had been years since I'd sorted through those boxes. Most of them were dusty memories, baby clothes, school projects, tax files. But in one of them, a box marked Grace, personal. I found an old flip phone. Daniel's, a backup one he claimed he'd lost years ago during a fishing trip with friends. It still worked. The battery was nearly dead, but it turned on. I didn't expect to find anything. But when I opened the text messages folder, there was one name that stood out: Caleb. The last message from Daniel, dated over a year ago, read, "Keep this between us. She can't know yet. Not until I say so." My hands went numb. This wasn't paranoia. This was a conspiracy. My husband and my son had been hiding something from me for over a year. Coordinating, collaborating, managing me. The phone slipped from my hand and hit the attic floor with a dull thud. That evening, I didn't mention it. I couldn't. I didn't know where to start. But I watched Caleb more closely than ever. He smiled when I asked about his day. He washed his dishes. He asked me about my garden. But there was a ghost behind his eyes, a weight he was carrying, and the sick part was, he believed it was for my own good. That night, I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked into Daniel's office downstairs. He kept it locked, but the key was still in the antique chest in our bedroom, hidden behind a false drawer, as if I didn't know every inch of this house better than he ever did. Inside, I found a locked drawer. I picked it open with an old hairpin, just like I used to when Caleb and his sister locked themselves in the bathroom fighting. Inside were manila folders, password notebooks, foreign bank statements, and photos. One photo in particular stopped my heart cold. It was Daniel standing next to a woman, a young woman, and beside her was a child, a boy, about 8 years old. He looked exactly like Caleb at that age. I dropped the photo like it burned me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was a second life. And my son, my own son, had known all along. There's a specific kind of stillness that happens when your reality collapses, like the air itself is waiting to see if you'll scream or just crumble. That's what it felt like the moment I saw that photo. Daniel with a woman I'd never seen before. Younger. Pretty in a distant, careful sort of way. And the boy. God, that boy, he had Daniel's eyes and Caleb's jawline. That was no coincidence. That was blood. I stared at it for a long time, numb. I didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, I gathered the photo, the foreign bank documents, and the burner phone into a folder. I took them upstairs and slid them into my closet behind the old shoebox that held birthday cards and receipts from a lifetime I suddenly didn't recognize. Then I sat on my bed and waited. Waited for what I didn't know. Maybe for my own rage to wake up. Or maybe just for the fog in my brain to clear enough to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do next. The next day, I started cleaning Caleb's room. Not out of suspicion, or so I told myself. I said I just needed to distract myself, to tidy, to feel control over something. His room was neat like always. That had always been part of the pain. He made it so easy to trust him. He folded his clothes, lined up his books, vacuumed without being asked. But when I moved the nightstand, I found something wedged behind it, something small and folded like a secret trying to hide. It was a letter. No envelope, no name on the front. Just a single page folded in half. I opened it with shaking hands. And I swear to you, my legs gave out. I sank to the floor, letter trembling in my grip. The letter handwritten in Caleb's neat block letters. Dad, I did what you asked. I haven't told Mom. But I'm not okay with this anymore. I met him. You didn't prepare me for how much he looks like me. She, the woman, she's broken. You're pretending this is all clean, but it's not. And you keep saying it's better for Mom not to know, that she can't handle it. But I think the truth is, you just don't want to face her. I'm not sure who you are anymore. I'll keep the secret a little longer, but it's killing me. Caleb. I didn't even know I was crying until the paper blurred in front of me. So it was true. All of it. There was another woman, another child, and Caleb had known, had met them, had been sworn to secrecy by the man I built a life with. And the worst part, the part that dug under my skin and made me want to scream, was that Caleb had done it all for me, to protect me. I waited until evening, I told myself I'd talk to him, sit him down, and confront it. But when he came home, his face looked so tired, so heavy that my words dissolved in my throat. Instead, I handed him a plate of food and watched him eat. He didn't look at me once. Halfway through his meal, I spoke. "I cleaned your room today." He froze, fork hovering in midair. I added softly, "Found a letter behind your nightstand." His eyes widened just a fraction. I kept going. "One you wrote to your father." He put the fork down. Slowly. Precisely. We sat in silence, the air between us full of landmines. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. That was all. Not denial. Not a scramble of excuses. Just sorrow. "You met him?" I asked quietly. "The boy." He nodded. "A few times. His name is Oliver." My stomach twisted. Somehow giving him a name made it worse. Why, I whispered. "Why would your father do this?" He let out a slow, pained breath. "Because he could. Because he thought he could handle 2 lives." A bitter laugh slipped from my throat. "And you kept it from me." His voice cracked. "I didn't want to. But I didn't know what it would do to you. I still don't." I looked at him, then really looked at him. My son. My boy. The one I held through fevers, through heartbreak, through his sister's depression and eventual distance. He looked so much older than he was. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. I shook my head. "You weren't. You were protecting him." That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat in the dark living room and stared at the walls, the family photos, the wedding portrait, the happy memories I now questioned. Had I really been so blind? Or had I just chosen to stay asleep around 2 a.m.? Caleb came downstairs. He didn't say a word. He just sat beside me on the couch, hands in his lap like a child waiting for punishment. "Why did you write that letter?" I asked after a while. "I needed to get it out," he replied. Even if he never read it. I nodded slowly. Then I asked the one question I had been avoiding all night. "Does she know about me?" Caleb turned to me. "Yes. And Oliver." He hesitated. "He thinks you're someone far away, someone who wouldn't understand." Tears welled in my eyes again. "And what do you think I am, Caleb?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Because the truth was, he didn't know anymore. That night, I made a decision. This house, this family had been built on a foundation of half-truths and smiling betrayals. But not anymore. I had spent my life being the glue, the quiet one, the steady ground everyone else stepped on. Not anymore. The next day, I opened a private checking account. And then I started planning. Because if Daniel thought I was too fragile to handle the truth, he had no idea what I was capable of when I finally saw clearly. When betrayal finally knocks the wind out of you, there's a strange phase that follows, not rage, not even grief. It's inventory. You start walking backward through your life, opening every drawer you once closed, shining a light into every room you told yourself didn't matter. I started remembering things I had buried, or maybe things I had chosen to forget. There was a night years ago when Daniel came home late, later than ever before. I remember it vividly now, though I hadn't thought about it in over a decade. It was raining hard. I had just put the kids to bed. Caleb was still in middle school, and our daughter had a cold. I'd called Daniel 3 times that evening. No answer. When he finally walked in soaked to the bone, he kissed my cheek with cold lips and said, "Traffic." He didn't make eye contact. He went straight to the laundry room and changed clothes before I could see the water stain on the front of his shirt, not rain. Something thicker. He never explained. I never asked. At the time, I told myself it didn't matter. Now I realize it always mattered. And then there was the weekend he said he was at a conference in D.C. I remember because I had just been promoted to principal at the elementary school, and he missed the celebratory dinner I threw for my staff at the house. He sent flowers. That was unlike him. A note attached said, Proud of you, always. It wasn't his handwriting. At the time, I assumed he asked an assistant to send them. Now I know better. After finding Caleb's letter, I couldn't help but see Daniel through new eyes. Every trip, every long meeting, every unexplained expense, it wasn't noise. It was pattern. My denial hadn't just been passive, it had been willful. Why? Because I loved him. Because I needed the illusion of a stable marriage for the kids. For me, maybe it was simpler. Maybe I just didn't want to be the woman whose husband had another family, but that's exactly who I was. I went looking for more. The attic hadn't been enough. I knew Daniel kept things in his garage workshop. He was meticulous. Old school. He didn't trust cloud storage, always said paper leaves a trail I can control. I waited until he was out of town, a client retreat in Chicago, he said. I knew better now. In the cabinet behind the drill press beneath a box of old tax receipts, I found a stack of notebooks bound with rubber bands, receipts, hotel logs, gifts purchased under aliases, and photographs. One was of Oliver at what looked like a birthday party. Balloons, a cake with a 5-candle. Daniel stood in the back half in shadow, sunglasses on, like he was trying not to be recognized, even in his own secret world. My hands shook. Not from rage, from clarity. This had been going on for at least 5 years, longer than I dared imagine. Later that evening, I sat with Caleb again. We didn't speak much anymore, but I needed to ask something I had never dared. How did it start? I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. I was 23, he said. Dad asked me to meet someone. He said it was a favor, something discreet. Said it would make sense when I got there. He rubbed his hands together. When I met Oliver, I thought he was some distant cousin, but then I saw the way Dad looked at him. Like he was trying not to feel proud. And the woman. He hesitated. Her name is Claire. She used to work at one of Dad's offices. Of course she did. She's not a bad person, he added quickly. She didn't ask for this. I think she was just trapped. Like all of us. That word sat heavy between us. Trapped. We had all been trapped in Daniel's version of truth, one he edited carefully, lovingly, like a man composing a story where he was always the hero. I started remembering something else then. Years ago, our daughter had come to me, eyes puffy, lips trembling, and said, "Dad lies to you." She couldn't have been more than 14. I had brushed it off. Told her she was just mad he took her phone away. Teenager stuff. But she'd said it again, quieter. "He lies to you, Mom. Not just to me." She ran up the stairs, slammed her door, and didn't speak to me for a day and a half. Now I wonder what she saw. What she knew even back then. Maybe that's part of the reason she moved across the country right after college. The distance wasn't about ambition. Maybe it was survival. That night, I didn't cry. I went to the bathroom mirror, stared at myself for a long time. Not in the way women sometimes do when checking makeup or fighting wrinkles. I looked into my own eyes like they belonged to a stranger. Who was I? A woman who dedicated 3 decades to a man who carved a double life right under her nose. A mother whose son thought she was too delicate to hear the truth. A woman who remembered warning signs like ghosts whispering too late. I wasn't just betrayed. I was rewritten. But something was shifting inside me. A line had been crossed, yes, but now I saw that it had always been there. I'd just stepped over it too many times with my eyes closed. Now I was wide awake. And I had a plan. There's a moment when anger overtakes sorrow, not in a loud, explosive way, but like a tide rising quietly until the shore is gone. That's how it felt the night I opened Daniel's laptop. He kept it with him, constantly guarded it like it contained national secrets. But he'd forgotten it that morning in the rush to make his flight. I should have felt guilty, maybe. I didn't. I had spent 32 years honoring his privacy, and he'd spent at least 10 destroying mine behind my back. So I opened it. No password. That was the first surprise. The second, he had a folder buried in his documents named Consulting 2020. Harmless on the surface. Until I opened it. Inside were dozens of scanned files, some labeled with names I didn't recognize. Others named things like Claire housing Oliver's school tuition trust accounts draft, and one that nearly made me throw up Will in case Grace finds out. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a scanned draft of a will unsigned where everything was divided between me and Claire. Equal distribution. To me, the legal wife. To her, the secret. The final line was underlined to ensure both families are protected. Families. Plural. I closed the laptop and just sat there. The house was too quiet. The walls too clean. I felt like I was floating above my life watching some other woman live it. A woman who'd been carefully manipulated into loving a man who never truly gave her his whole self. That woman had been me. The next morning, I told Caleb I wanted to talk. We sat in the sunroom. It was the same room where Daniel had proposed to me all those years ago, right after repainting the old porch, with trembling hands and an over-rehearsed smile. Now it felt like a stage set built on rot. I need you to tell me everything I said to Caleb. No more shielding, no more lies, every detail. He stared at me, then nodded slowly. So he did. It started when Caleb was 23, just out of college. Daniel had approached him like it was a mission, something delicate, important. He told Caleb that he had made mistakes years ago and now there was a child, a boy named Oliver. He said the mother Claire wasn't stable and he needed someone he trusted to occasionally check in on them to keep things civil and smooth. Caleb had been stunned, betrayed, but Daniel, ever the master manipulator, had reframed it as a duty. I need someone strong, someone I trust. You're the only one I can count on. He paid Caleb's grad school tuition in full shortly after. I don't think that was a coincidence. Over time, Caleb became the buffer, the mediator between Daniel's lives. When Claire needed something tuition, a rent increase, medical bills, Caleb passed the requests on. When Daniel needed updates, Caleb gave them. He tried to distance himself. He hated it. But Daniel had a hold on him. Guilt, pressure, and more than anything, fear of what the truth would do to me. Why didn't you come to me? I asked him. I wanted to, he said. I almost did. 12 times. Then why didn't you? His voice dropped to a whisper. Because I thought if you knew you'd finally break. I stared at him. And what do you see now, Caleb? A woman broken. He shook his head. No. I see someone I should have trusted all along. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Later that evening, I sat alone in Daniel's office, pulling every piece together: the will, the photos, the hidden documents, even the hotel receipts I found in his workshop. He didn't just cheat. He built a parallel world. And the more I looked, the more I saw how calculated it all was. He had created trust funds in Oliver's name. He had purchased a condo in Claire's name under an LLC. He had bank accounts overseas. This wasn't a fling. It wasn't a mistake. It was a life. And I had been his insurance policy. The stable family. The one he showcased. The one he came back to when he needed to feel legitimate. It's hard to describe the kind of rage that builds when you realize you've been used as camouflage. I printed out every document, every photo. I lay them on the dining table like evidence in a trial. And then I called him. He answered on the second ring. Hey, he said, too casual. How's everything? You need to come home, I said. Now. He paused. What's going on? Your son, your wife, your other family. You pick the order. Silence. Then carefully, Grace. What did Caleb tell you? I almost laughed. Even in that moment, he deflected. I'm not talking about Caleb. I'm talking about Claire. About Oliver. About the will you wrote in case I ever found out. More silence. Then, okay, I'll take the first flight. I hung up without another word. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the dining table and looked at the mess of paper and images, my life reduced to transactions and secrets. This wasn't about heartbreak anymore. It was about justice. And it was about time. I turned 57 on a Sunday. It was early spring, and the tulips Caleb and I had planted the year before were just beginning to break through the soil, bright little promises that the world was still turning, still blooming even when mine was withering in silence. Daniel flew home the night before, just in time. He brought flowers, roses, my favorite, of course. He hadn't forgotten that detail. Men like him rarely forget the details that make them seem attentive. He kissed my cheek like he hadn't detonated a bomb inside our lives, smiled like we were still in love. I let him do all of it, because I wasn't ready to burn the house down. Not yet. Not until I was sure everyone could see the match in my hand. Caleb was quiet at dinner. I had made my own cake German chocolate the way I liked it. No one offered to help, which was fine. I wanted control of something. Anything. The three of us sat around the table, the awkwardest triangle in the world. Daniel toasted me. A speech full of the usual half-truths. To the strongest woman I've ever known, he said, raising his glass. My partner, my anchor, the love of my life. I almost laughed. Caleb didn't even fake a smile. We ate in silence for a while. Then suddenly Caleb put his fork down. The sound of metal on china cracked through the air like a shot. He looked at me, then at Daniel. We're pretending everything's fine, he said. Like always. Daniel's expression didn't change. That's how I knew it was real. He didn't flinch, didn't panic. Just leaned back in his chair and folded his hands like he was waiting for the storm to pass. What's this about? He said calmly. Caleb stood up. You want to give speeches about love and loyalty? Tell her the truth. I already know, I said, keeping my voice flat. Everything. Daniel turned to me now. Really looked at me. For the first time in weeks. Maybe years. You do, I do. And then I stood too, walked over to the sideboard and pulled out the folder I had hidden earlier that day. I dropped it on the table in front of him. Photographs. Bank transfers. Claire's name. Oliver's birth certificate. The will. All of it. He didn't even reach for it. Just stared. I wanted to tell you, he said finally. Don't, I said sharply. Don't lie, now. He nodded once. Then it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I sat down slowly, staring at the man across from me, the father of my children, the man I built a life beside the one I sacrificed for, endured, for stayed silent for. How was it supposed to happen, Daniel? I asked. Was I supposed to die first so you could split your empire between two families without a fight? His face didn't change. He'd rehearsed this moment. Maybe not with me, but in his mind. People like Daniel always plan for fallout. I made a mistake, he said. No, I replied. You made a life. With someone else. With a child. A second home. A second identity. He looked at Caleb. And I realized then he wasn't ashamed. He was calculating. He was trying to figure out if Caleb would still protect him. My son, my quiet, tortured son, stood straighter than I'd ever seen him. She knows everything, he said. And I'm done covering for you. Something in Daniel's face broke then. A flicker of betrayal, his own son turning against him. I saw it clearly. He hadn't feared me discovering the truth. He'd feared losing control of Caleb. After dinner, Daniel left. Said he needed air. Claimed he was staying at a hotel. I didn't ask which one. I just watched him pack a bag and walk out the front door like a man temporarily inconvenienced. Not shattered. Not sorry. Just inconvenienced. Caleb and I sat on the couch in silence. He looked at me after a long while. I'm sorry I let him use me, he said. I thought I was keeping you safe. You were keeping me in the dark, I said gently. That's not the same thing. I know. We sat for a long time, the air between us full of what had been broken. Then he asked quietly, "What now?" And I answered without hesitation. Now I said we stop playing their game. That night I didn't cry. Not because it didn't hurt God, it hurt. It ached deep into my bones, but because I'd finally stepped out of the lie. I was no longer the fool. I was the woman he underestimated. And that more than anything would be his undoing. Daniel didn't come home for 2 days. Not a call. Not a text. Just silence, as if avoiding the wreckage might undo the crash. On the third day he returned. Same pressed shirt. Same leather shoes. Same calm, steady voice, like he was walking back into a boardroom, not the ruins of a 30-year marriage. "I think we should talk," he said, standing just inside the doorway. I didn't respond, just pointed to the kitchen. He followed me like a guest in his own house. Caleb wasn't home. I'd asked him to leave not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed to face Daniel alone. It was time. He sat across from me, folding his hands neatly, like he always did when he wanted to seem reasonable. "I'm not going to deny what you found," he said. "I know I've hurt you, but I want you to understand." "No," I interrupted. "I don't want your context. I want the truth." He nodded once. "Fine." And then, slowly, methodically, Daniel began to talk. "It started 15 years ago," he said. "Claire was a junior marketing analyst at his firm. She was younger, ambitious, flattered by attention. He claimed it was never serious, that it was a lapse in judgment, a weakness during a difficult time in our marriage. He said he tried to end it. But then she got pregnant." He paused there, letting the words hang in the air like a noose. "I didn't know what to do," he said. "I was afraid of losing everything." I leaned forward. "So you lied?" "I compartmentalized," he said. "I built boundaries. I supported her financially. I visited when I could. I kept it separate. You kept me separate." My voice was quiet but sharp. He winced. "I thought I was protecting you." I laughed. "You men always use that word. Protecting. As if we're glass. As if we're stupid." His mouth opened, but I didn't let him speak. "You didn't protect me, Daniel. You controlled me. You fed me just enough truth to keep me loyal while you wrote your real life behind my back." He sighed. "There were times I almost told you," he said. "But I was afraid of what it would do to Caleb. To us. Caleb knew. For years. You dragged him into your mess like a pawn." He looked down, ashamed. Or pretending to be. I wasn't sure anymore. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did. Because you let it. He didn't argue. Just nodded. Then I asked the question that had been burning in my chest for days. "Do you love them?" He blinked. "I care about Claire," he said carefully. "She's different. She needed me in a way you never did." I felt that like a slap. "And Oliver?" He hesitated. "He's a good kid. Smart. I want to be there for him." I nodded slowly. "You want it both ways," I said. "Two homes. Two identities. You want to be the good man in both." He met my eyes. "I never stopped loving you, Grace." I stared at him. And then I said the most honest thing I had said to him in years. "I believe that. And that's what makes this so much worse." Love didn't excuse this. It didn't erase a second family, years of lies, and the trauma left behind in both our children. It didn't unwrite the way he turned Caleb into a messenger boy between two worlds, or how he'd turned me into a placeholder. He leaned forward, voice softer. "I'm not asking for forgiveness right now. I'm asking for space, time, to work through this together. You want me to stay married to you? I want to make it right." I stared at him. "You can't. I can try." I shook my head slowly. "You're still thinking like a strategist, Daniel. You're trying to manage fallout. But this isn't a scandal. This is my life." He looked stunned, like I had finally stepped outside the script he'd written for me. "Good." Let him be surprised. I walked over to the counter and picked up the folder, the one I'd spent the last week building piece by piece. Here, I said, placing it in front of him. He opened it slowly. Bank records, emails, the fake LLC, photos, everything I hadn't shown him before. "Where did you get all this?" he asked. I looked. He looked up at me. "Are you going to ruin me?" I met his gaze. "I haven't decided yet." He left after that. Didn't try to hug me. Didn't say "I love you" again. Just nodded, walked out the door, and left me standing in a kitchen that no longer felt like home. That night, I sat at the window and watched the garden lights flicker on. I thought of Claire, of Oliver, of all the birthdays Daniel had missed here because he'd been playing father in a different zip code. I thought of my daughter halfway across the country who once told me, "He lies to you." And I thought of Caleb, the boy caught between two truths. Forced into silence, dragged into deception, burdened with guilt that was never his to carry. I wasn't broken, but I was changed. And the truth, the full, ugly truth, had finally surfaced. Now I just needed to decide what I was going to do with it. The next morning, I found myself standing in the doorway of Caleb's old bedroom. He hadn't lived there full-time in years. College, then work, then an apartment 20 minutes away that he kept just in case. But the room was still his. The shelves still held his high school trophies. The closet still had the blazer he wore to his first debate tournament. It smelled faintly of pine and aftershave. I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe I wasn't looking at all. I was listening to the silence of my own mind after Daniel's confession to the weight that had shifted inside me. And then I noticed the drawer, the bottom one in the desk, locked. Not the kind of lock Caleb ever used, but I remembered the key. It was taped to the back of his second bookshelf, a childhood hiding place for candy and notes and other teenage secrets. I found it right where I thought it would be. Inside the drawer there were envelopes, 12 of them, all addressed to Mom. None of them sent. My hands trembled as I opened the first one. The paper was creased and ink blotted like it had been written in a storm of emotion. "Dear Mom, I wish I could tell you what I know, but if I do, everything changes. Dad says you'd fall apart. He says you'd never recover. I don't think that's true, but I don't want to be the one who breaks you. I'm sorry I'm a coward." I stopped reading. Tears clouded my vision. I sat down on the floor and read every single letter. They spanned years, from the day Caleb found out about Claire and Oliver at age 16 to college, to the week before I found the truth myself. Each one was a window into my son's heartbreak, his shame, his impossible position. He had carried the unbearable weight of a secret too heavy for a boy his age, and worse, he had done it for me. One letter stood out more than the rest. It was dated just over a year ago. "Mom, sometimes I wonder if you already know. Not the full truth, but something. Like when your eyes go quiet when Dad says he's working late, or how you never ask questions when he cancels dinner. I don't think you're blind. I think you're surviving. But that's not fair to you. You've spent your whole life giving, loving us, loving him. And he gave his love to someone else like it was a currency he could split in half. I don't know how to fix this, but I love you. I always have. And when the truth finally breaks the surface, I hope you know that. I was never protecting him. I was trying to protect you. Love, Caleb." I couldn't breathe, because I had known. Not all of it, but enough. The absences, the cold apologies, the way Daniel always looked relieved when I didn't ask where he'd been. I wasn't stupid. I wasn't weak. I had chosen not to know. And that choice had broken Caleb in ways I'd never seen, not because I'd ignored him, but because I had refused to acknowledge my own betrayal. The betrayal of not listening. That night, when he came over, I didn't mention the letters at first. We sat in the living room. He asked how I was. I said raw. He nodded. Same. Then I looked at him and said quietly, I read them. His face froze. The letters in your drawer. He looked down embarrassed. I didn't mean for you to see those. I know, I said. But I'm glad I did. He looked up then, not like a man but like the boy I'd raised. The one with the bruised heart and wide eyes who used to ask me, "Do you still love me even when I mess up I failed you?" I said. "No," he replied instantly. "You didn't." I let it go on too long. I let his silences become mine. I let you carry his secret. You were surviving. He echoed, repeating his own words. That's not failure, but it hurt you. He didn't deny it. Then something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Handwritten. For Mom. What's this? I asked. The last one, he said. I opened it, my fingers trembling. Inside a single sentence. You don't owe him mercy. You owe yourself truth. We sat there for a long time, two people who had been lied to in different ways. Mother and son, broken mended, broken again. But this time we were facing the same direction. I need to meet them, I said finally. He didn't flinch. You sure I need to look her in the eye? I said. And I need to see the boy who carries his name. I need to know if they're victims too, or part of his machine. Caleb just nodded. I'll make the call. The next day he did. Claire agreed to meet. No hesitation. She even sounded eager, like she'd been waiting for this confrontation. The meeting was set for Saturday. A quiet cafe on the edge of town. Neutral ground. I didn't sleep the night before, but I didn't cry either, because I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The cafe was one of those gentrified little places with reclaimed wood tables and too many oat milk options. I arrived early, 15 minutes early to be exact. I sat at a table in the far corner back against the wall. I wanted to see her first. Claire. The woman my husband had loved in secret. The mother of the child who had split my family down the middle. She arrived on time. Not a minute too soon, not a second too late. I recognized her from the photos I'd found, only now she was older. Probably late 30s. Fit. Hair perfectly styled in that effortless, messy bun way that actually takes effort. She wore a pale green blouse and gold earrings that caught the light as she looked around. Then her eyes found mine. And she smiled. Like we were old friends meeting for coffee. She walked toward me, heels quiet, movements rehearsed, and slid into the seat across from me. Grace, she said, voice light and confident. I didn't respond. Not with words. I just stared. Her smile softened like she was trying to put me at ease. I wasn't there to be eased. I've wanted to meet you for a long time, she said. I can't imagine why I replied. Because I needed to see what he gave up. That caught me off guard. She reached for her latte and took a sip like we were discussing a book club pick and not the devastation of my marriage. I want to be clear, I said, leaning forward. I didn't come here for closure. I came to understand how you lived with yourself knowing I existed, knowing he was lying. Claire looked down at her cup. Then quietly, I didn't always know you existed. That made me pause. He told me he was separated, said the marriage was cold, that you were just co-parenting until Caleb graduated. I felt bile rise in my throat. And you believed that I wanted to, she said. And once I was pregnant, it didn't matter anymore. She set her cup down and folded her hands. I'm not asking for your sympathy, Grace. I know what I did. I knew eventually the truth would catch up. I just didn't think it would take 15 years. I studied her face. She wasn't smug. She wasn't groveling either. She was something worse, neutral. Like this was all just inevitable. You raised a child, I said. A whole second life, while mine was falling apart piece by piece. She hesitated. I didn't raise Oliver to think your family didn't matter. Did he even know we existed? She looked me in the eye. He knows everything now. I told him when he turned 13. I thought it was time. How noble of you. Her expression didn't change. You think I stole your husband? She said. I didn't answer. Maybe I did. But maybe he was already leaving. I felt heat rise in my chest. You don't get to rewrite this, I snapped. You were a secret, an affair. He chose to stay married to me and raise our children. You don't get to pretend this was fate. I'm not pretending anything, she said. But he loved us both. No, he used us both. Her face finally cracked. You think I didn't suffer raising a child in silence, watching him sneak out on holidays, watching Oliver ask why Daddy couldn't sleep over. I stared at her, then said, I hope it was worth it. She looked away. We sat in silence for a long moment. Then carefully she said, Oliver is a good boy. He's kind. He's smart. He looks like Daniel. But I promise you he doesn't act like him. I didn't know what to say to that. She reached into her bag and pulled out a photo. I brought this, she said, in case you wanted to see him. I hesitated, then took it. He was 13, maybe 14 in the picture, smiling, eyes wide. He looked just like Caleb at that age. The resemblance was jarring, painful even. But there was innocence in his face. No deception, no guilt. Just a boy. Does he want to meet me? I asked quietly. She nodded. I think he does. I looked up at her. I don't hate him, I said. Claire exhaled like she'd been holding her breath. And you? I asked. She looked surprised. What about me? I don't hate you either, I said. But that doesn't mean I forgive you? She nodded. I wouldn't expect you to. I stood up. The conversation was over. She remained seated, finishing her drink as if nothing monumental had happened, but something had. I had looked her in the eye. I had faced the woman who'd lived in my shadow, or maybe I had lived in hers. I wasn't sure anymore. I walked out into the sunlight and breathed for the first time all day. Later that night, I sat with Caleb on the back porch. He asked, how was she? I thought for a long moment. She was real. And the boy, I looked at him. He's yours, I said, whether you like it or not. He's your brother. Caleb didn't flinch. He just nodded. Then he asked, what are you going to do now? I thought about it. I thought about the file of evidence in my desk drawer, the emails, the accounts, the photos. I thought about the letters. I thought about Claire's composure, Oliver's face, Daniel's cowardice. And finally I answered, I'm going to end this. On my terms. I waited a week. Not because I wasn't ready, I had never been more ready, but because I needed Daniel to think the storm had passed, that I was done asking questions, that I had retreated into silence, the silence he'd always mistaken for peace. On Thursday night, I made his favorite dinner, roast chicken, rosemary potatoes, a glass of that Malbec he pretended to know things about. He walked through the front door humming, loosened his tie like nothing had changed, kissed my cheek out of habit and sat down. Everything looked normal, except it wasn't. He took a bite and moaned. Just like old times. I smiled. You like it, I've missed this, he said, mouth half full. You. Us. I tilted my head. Have you? Of course, he said quickly, too quickly. These past few weeks have been hard. You've been distant. Distant. I nearly laughed. Maybe because I found out you've been living a double life? I said lightly like I was telling him the weather forecast. He froze. Just for a second. But I saw it. The flicker behind the eyes. He blinked. What are you talking about? There it was. The first lie. I stood and walked to the drawer by the kitchen, pulled out the envelope, set it on the table between us. He stared at it like it might explode. Open it, I said. He didn't move. Go ahead. Let's both pretend I don't know what's inside. He opened it. Inside, printed photos, email printouts, transaction records, dates, locations, receipts from hotels where he never took me. Photos of Claire's house, Claire's car. Claire and him 6 years ago holding hands outside a clinic. He didn't even ask where I got them. He just sat there, silent. I walked back to my seat and poured myself a glass of wine. Do you want to start with the affair, I said, or the son you never told me about? He swallowed hard. Grace. No. No softening my name. I want facts. I didn't know how to tell you. I know. That's the part you chose. You could have told me when she got pregnant. When she gave birth. When he turned 5. When he turned 10. When I turned gray waiting for the man I married to come home. He winced. But I didn't stop. I could have forgiven a mistake, I said. But this wasn't a mistake. It was a system. A life you built in secret. One where I played the fool. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Another lie. I leaned forward, voice steady. You were with her for 15 years. That's not a slip, Daniel. That's a second marriage. He rubbed his face. Finally, he whispered, I didn't want to lose you. You already lost me, I snapped. You just didn't notice. He looked up at me. I love you. I laughed. I actually laughed. Which version of me do you love? The woman you lied to every week. The one you left home to visit her after dinner and came back saying you worked late. He said nothing. I met her, I added. His head jerked up. She smiled when she saw me, I said. She told me you said we were separated, that you lied to her too. His jaw clenched. She said Oliver wants to meet me. His eyes flickered with panic. I smiled. You never thought I'd get that close to your secret, did you? I didn't want you to get hurt, he said. You weren't protecting me, I said. You were protecting your comfort. He started to cry then. The kind of quiet, shame-laced crying that men like him do when the story's over and they realize they're not the hero. And I sat there watching him, feeling nothing. Not pity. Not hate. Just nothing. I need you to leave, I said. He wiped his face. Can we just talk about— No, I cut in. Talking is what you do when there's still trust. He sat back stunned. I stood up. I don't know what comes next, I said. But it doesn't include you in this house. Not until I figure out what I want. Please, you don't get to beg now, I said. You had 15 years. He stood slowly. You'll tell Caleb I stared at him. He already knew. The color drained from his face. What he knew since he was 16. You let him carry it for you. Let him watch you lie to me night after night. You didn't just betray me, you broke your son. He whispered, I didn't think. Exactly, I said. You never think about anyone but yourself. He walked to the door, paused, then turned and said, I do love you. I didn't answer, just shut the door behind him and locked it. That night I sat in the dark glass of wine untouched in my hand. Not crying, not shaking, just still. I had watched him lie to my face and fall apart in front of me. But I hadn't fallen with him, because this time I wasn't the one who broke the first morning after Daniel left. I woke up before sunrise. The bed felt too large, too quiet, but not empty in the way I expected. Not hollow, just still. The kind of stillness that follows a storm when even the wind is exhausted. I got up, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table. It wasn't until the second sip that I noticed something. There was no sound, no footsteps upstairs, no drawers slamming, no fake cough from Daniel as he scrolled through emails pretending to be busier than he was. The house had a heartbeat when he was in it, even if it beat in lies. Now it was just me. And the silence he left behind. Caleb came down later, still rubbing sleep from his eyes. He looked at me then, at the other chair. Empty. He didn't ask where his father was. He just sat. Did he cry? He asked quietly. I nodded. Did he lie? I gave a bitter smile. Of course. We didn't talk much more. The weight of what we'd both lived through hung between us like a damp curtain. He didn't want comfort. He wanted truth. Maybe for the first time in his life he was finally ready for it. So I said it. I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. He looked at me. It wasn't your fault. I still should have known. A mother should know what her son is carrying. He hesitated. I didn't want to break you. I reached for his hand. You didn't. But I'm sorry you had to protect me from him. That was never your job. The next few days passed in strange rhythm. I boxed up Daniel's things. Not like a widow, gently with reverence. Like a woman cleaning out a storage unit of lies. I found things I hadn't seen in years. An old love note he wrote me on our 5th anniversary. Tucked in the back of his drawer behind a receipt for a weekend trip I knew now hadn't been with me. Photos of our wedding wedged beside a bank envelope labeled Oliver's tuition. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just folded, packed, and taped shut. One afternoon, I drove to a storage facility and left it all there. Every memory that had become poisoned. Let them sit in a room that cost $42.50 a month. Let Daniel decide whether they were worth keeping. Claire emailed me a few days later. Oliver keeps asking about you. He doesn't blame you for anything. I don't want to push, but he said, maybe I'll finally understand my face if I meet the woman who saw his lies. I sat with that line for a long time. Understand my face. The boy had his father's eyes, but maybe he didn't have his father's soul. I didn't respond right away. I needed to be sure that my reasons were my own, that I wasn't chasing revenge or some twisted redemption. I talked to Caleb. Would it hurt you? I asked if I met him. Caleb looked at me with something new in his eyes. Not just pain, permission. You should, he said. If you want to. I nodded, then asked something harder. Would you ever want to meet him? He was quiet a long time, then said, not yet. But maybe one day. Just to see if he's anything like me. I wanted to say he wasn't, but I didn't know that. So I wrote Claire back. Tell Oliver I'm willing to meet. One time. Public place. No expectations. Her reply came within an hour. He'll be so happy. Thank you. Whatever happens, thank you. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual, trying to decide what version of myself to wear. The wife, the mother, the betrayed, the survivor. I chose simple clothes, no makeup, just me. The truth didn't need decoration. We met at the park near the old library. Oliver sat on the bench, already hands in his lap. Claire stood nearby watching. When he saw me, he stood up. He looked nervous. Teenagers don't often meet people tied to the deepest parts of their identity. He smiled first, then said, Hi, I'm Oliver, I finished. I guess you already know that, he said, with a shy laugh. I nodded. I'm Grace. I know. He sat and I joined him. We talked about small things at first. School. His favorite music. He was into classic rock. Funny, that was Daniel's genre. Then we lapsed into silence. Finally, he asked, Do you hate my mom? No, I said, but I hated what she did. Do you hate me? I looked at him, really looked. And I said, No. You were never the lie. You were just the secret. He looked down, and for a second I saw it, the weight of someone else's shame on a child's shoulders. You're not him, I said gently. Don't carry what he did. He nodded, then whispered, Thank you. As I left, Claire came over. We didn't speak, just exchanged a look. Mutual wounds, mutual surrender. She mouthed, Thank you. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. That night, Caleb asked how it went. I said it wasn't what I expected. He asked, Was it worth it? I thought about Oliver's face and said, Yes. The silence Daniel left behind hadn't vanished, but now it wasn't empty. It was open. And sometimes, that's even better. 3 weeks had passed since Daniel left. 2 since I met Oliver. Life had found its rhythm again, slower, deliberate, quieter. I found myself appreciating things I used to overlook: the way the sunlight landed on the dining room floor in the late afternoon, the silence between my own thoughts, the small sigh Caleb let out when he fell asleep on the couch, with a book resting on his chest. It was healing, or so I thought, until the letters came. They arrived all at once, not in one envelope, but 3. Each with my name written in Daniel's familiar script, each sealed carefully, almost reverently. No return address. Just my name, our home address, and his handwriting like a ghost brushing my door. I stared at them for hours before opening the first one. It began like this: Grace, if you're reading this, I've finally accepted that I'm out of your life, and maybe I don't deserve to be heard. But I need to tell you anyway. What followed wasn't what I expected. Not excuses. Not even explanations. Just confessions. In his words. He wrote about Claire. It started before Caleb was even born, but I told myself it was just distraction. Just stress. That I'd stop. But I didn't. I kept going. Kept building walls between us, then blaming you when you couldn't reach me anymore. He wrote about Oliver. When she told me she was pregnant, I felt 2 things: fear and guilt. Not love, not joy, just pure panic. But when I saw him, I knew. I'd done something irreversible, and I couldn't bring him into our world without tearing it all apart. And then he wrote about me. I watched you every day carrying this family, holding it together like your life depended on it. And I let you. I let you believe I was doing the same. But I wasn't. I was lying to survive. You were living. I was hiding. I folded the letter. I couldn't read more that night. The second one waited on the counter, daring me to pick it up. But I needed to sleep, to breathe. So I left it alone. The next morning, I opened the second letter. This one was harder. Because it wasn't about him. It was about Caleb. I saw it in his eyes. When he was 16, he knew. I didn't say anything because I was terrified. Not of him telling you, but of him hating me. And when he didn't say anything, I convinced myself it meant I still had time. But that silence, it wasn't mercy. It was disgust. And I earned it. He described moments I didn't know had happened: late-night talks with Caleb where he fumbled for words but said nothing. Missed father-son camping trips because he was busy. How he watched our son slowly withdraw, and how he chalked it up to teenage moods. I abandoned him emotionally years before I abandoned you physically, he wrote. And that is something I'll never forgive myself for. That line broke me. Because I remembered those years too: the cold dinners, the locked bedroom doors, the distance I thought was normal. I remembered blaming myself for Caleb's distance, telling myself I wasn't enough. But it wasn't me. It never was. The third letter sat unopened for days. Something about it terrified me. Maybe because I knew it would be the end, his final words. When I finally opened it, my hands were shaking. And this one wasn't for me. It was for Caleb. But he had addressed it to me, to choose whether Caleb ever saw it. I didn't read it at first. Just held it in my hands like it was a decision that might ruin or redeem something. Caleb saw it sitting on the table. He looked at me, and I looked back. I won't ask, he said. And he meant it. But that night, I read it. It wasn't like the others. It was desperate. Raw. I failed you, son. Not once, but every day I pretended things were fine. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I hope one day you'll understand that I was weak. Not cruel. Just weak. And that weakness hurt you more than I'll ever be able to explain. He included small memories: a birthday where he forgot to buy the gift himself, a game he missed because he was working late, A promise to take Caleb to see snow that never happened. You were always better than me, he wrote. Smarter, kinder, stronger. And I hope you become the man I couldn't. At the end, if you read this, it means your mother still believes I deserve a second chance at truth. And if she burned it, I would have understood. Either way, I love you. Always did. Just didn't know how to show it. I cried for the first time in weeks. Not for Daniel, but for what we lost. The years we could have had. The boy Caleb could have been if he hadn't been forced to grow up with someone else's shame sewn into his skin. The next morning, I handed Caleb the letter. Said nothing. He took it, held it quietly, and nodded. I'll read it when I'm ready. I didn't ask when. Or if. That was his choice now. That afternoon, I wrote Daniel back. Just 2 lines. I got your letters. We're moving forward whether you're in it or not. And I meant it. He left me with silence. But I no longer feared it. Because now the quiet didn't belong to him. It belonged to me. And in it, I could finally hear my own voice again. It started like any other Sunday. Overcast, lazy, with the scent of rain pressed against the windows. Caleb had been quiet all morning, though that wasn't unusual. He'd always been the kind of boy who kept his thoughts curled up inside him like a fist. But I could feel something shifting. The way he lingered over his coffee, the way he tapped his fingers against the table like he was counting time. Do you want to go somewhere? I finally asked. He looked at me startled. Why, I don't know. Just seems like your mind's not here. He paused, then said, There's a place I'd like to go, but I want you to come. He didn't tell me where. We drove for almost an hour, the roads winding through parts of town I hadn't visited in years. Eventually, we stopped at a quiet hill that overlooked the lake, the same place where Daniel once took us for a family picnic when Caleb was 5. Back when we still believed in the picture we painted. Caleb got out first, carrying something wrapped in a sweatshirt. I followed, unsure if I was witnessing a beginning or an ending. He sat on a large rock facing the water and gestured for me to sit beside him. He unwrapped the object in his lap. A small notebook. Leather-bound. Worn. I started this when I was 16, he said, after I found out. I looked at him. He didn't flinch. You knew that long? I asked. He nodded. I overheard a fight. Between Dad and Claire. One of those rare times he thought no one was home. What did they say? He swallowed. She was threatening to tell you. Said she was tired of hiding. He told her she'd destroy everything. That you would destroy him if you knew. I exhaled slow and heavy. He wasn't wrong, I said. That made him almost smile. Almost. I didn't write it to remember, he said. I wrote it because if I didn't, I'd explode. There were nights I wanted to scream in your face, shake you, beg you to see it. But I couldn't. Why not? Because I thought if I broke you, it would make me like him. I blinked back tears. You were never like him. He looked at me then. Really looked. Maybe not. But I lived with the lie. Every day. And I let you carry a version of reality that I knew was fake. He handed me the notebook. You can read it, if you want. I hesitated, then flipped it open. The handwriting was sharp, pressed deep into the page like each word cost him something. March 12th. Dad said he had a work trip, but I saw the message. It was Claire. She asked him if he was bringing Oliver. April 9th. Mom made dinner. Dad didn't show. I watched her stare at the door for 42 minutes before she finally gave up and packed it away. May 3rd. Sometimes I want to take a picture of her face when she's asleep. It's the only time she looks peaceful. I wonder what her dreams lie about. Page after page, moments I lived through but never knew. Because Caleb had been watching both of us, Daniel and me, from a quiet place of survival. He had been the only one awake while we both sleepwalked through a disaster. I'm sorry, I whispered, closing the notebook. I'm not showing you this to make you feel guilty, he said. I'm showing you because I don't want to be silent anymore, I understand. No, I mean it. I spent so many years thinking if I just buried it deep enough, I could be okay. But I'm not okay. I placed my hand over his. You don't have to be. We sat in silence for a long while. The lake was still, the world muted. Then he said something I'll never forget. Can I tell you something I've never said aloud? I nodded. He took a breath. When I was 17, I thought about leaving. Like for good. Disappearing. My stomach dropped. I had a bag packed. I even bought a bus ticket. I thought if I vanished, I could stop feeling like a ghost in my own house. What stopped you? He looked at me, eyes glistening. You knocked on my door that night, just to ask if I wanted hot chocolate. I remembered that night. It was random. We hadn't spoken much that day. I just had a feeling. That one moment he said reminded me that someone saw me. Maybe not everything, but enough. I squeezed his hand. I'm so glad you stayed. He smiled through tears. Me too. We drove home in silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was full. He had spoken his truth, and I had finally heard it. That evening, he placed the notebook on the coffee table. I don't think I need this anymore, he said. You sure? Yeah. I think I want to write something new now. That night, I dreamed of the lake, of a boy standing on the shore holding a notebook, and then letting it go page by page into the wind, not to forget, but to make space for something lighter. It was a Tuesday afternoon, one of those warm days where summer and autumn wrestled in the air. I was pruning the hydrangeas out front, humming some old tune when I saw her. Claire, standing across the street. Same sleek hair, same delicate posture, but something in her face had changed. She looked smaller. Not physically, but emotionally, like someone who had run too long and didn't know how to stop. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just stood there watching me. And I froze. I hadn't seen her since the confrontation, since she stood in my living room with her fake apology and hollow eyes. But now she looked different. Hollow still, but less composed. More human. I didn't say anything, just stared. Eventually, she crossed the street, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I straightened up and wiped the sweat from my brow. Claire, I said, not warmly, not coldly. Just a fact. Grace. She replied, her voice thin. She looked past me to the house, to Caleb. No, I said. To me. We stood in that silent standoff for what felt like forever. Then she said it. I thought I should tell you. Daniel's dead. I didn't flinch. She blinked, maybe expecting more from me. He died 2 weeks ago. Car accident, late at night. They say it was raining, he lost control. I let the silence stretch. She continued. He'd been drinking. There it was. Of course he had. I didn't come to cause trouble, she added quickly. I just thought you should hear it from someone instead of, well, the news. I studied her. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her hands trembled slightly. And then I asked the one thing I hadn't planned to. How's Oliver? Her mouth twitched at the corners. A brief flicker of something maternal, maybe. Or regret. He's devastated, she said. He loved his father. I think he still believed he'd fix everything someday. I nodded slowly. I know the feeling. She took a deep breath. I'm not here to apologize. I know that means nothing now. I almost admired her for not pretending. But I do want to say, I never hated you. I tilted my head. That's not better. I know, she said softly. It just means I watched you suffer without doing a thing to stop it. She paused. I was jealous of you. That caught me off guard. Of me. You had what I never could. A real family. Even if it was falling apart, it was yours. Daniel only ever gave me scraps. You got the whole illusion. I didn't respond right away. because it wasn't worth arguing over illusions. After a moment, she reached into her purse and pulled out a letter. Another one, but not from Daniel. It had Oliver's handwriting. He asked me to give this to Caleb. He doesn't know how to face him yet. I didn't take it immediately. Instead, I asked, "What do you want from me, Claire?" She blinked, startled. "Nothing. Really." After all this time, she hesitated. Then peace. Just peace. I want to stop being a villain in every story. I sighed. Then maybe you should stop acting like one. She didn't get angry. Didn't flinch. Just nodded slowly, the kind of nod that says, "I deserve that." "I'll go," she said, stepping back. But before she turned, I asked, "Do you miss him?" She looked up at me with tired eyes. "Yes. And I hate that I do." There it was. Honesty. Bitter, human, unclean. The only kind that meant anything anymore. I took the letter. Not for her. Not for Daniel. But for Oliver. And for Caleb. Because even if they never spoke again, the truth deserved to reach the light. That evening, I handed it to Caleb. He held it for a long time. Didn't open it. Just asked, "Was she here?" I nodded. And Daniel, I sat beside him. "He's gone." He didn't cry. Didn't speak. Just nodded almost to himself, like something had finally landed where it was supposed to. Later that night, I found the letter still unopened on the kitchen table, but I didn't move it. It wasn't mine to read, or protect, or destroy. This time, it was Caleb's choice, and I trusted him to make it. That night, I wrote in my own journal, not about Daniel, or Claire, or even Oliver. I wrote about myself, about how grief and freedom sometimes arrive wearing the same face, how letting go doesn't mean forgetting, how forgiveness isn't a gift we give others, it's the key to our own cell. Daniel was dead. Claire had disappeared down her own road, and Caleb had one last letter in front of him. But I had peace, and I'd learned finally that truth can hurt. But secrets, they rot everything. The letter sat untouched on the kitchen table for 3 days. I didn't ask, didn't pry, didn't glance at it too long when I walked by. It was like a wild animal in the room, fragile and dangerous and completely outside my control. Caleb avoided it, but not with the kind of fear I'd expected. It was more like reverence. Like the words inside could set fire to everything he'd just rebuilt. And maybe they could. But sometimes fire is exactly what we need to clear out the dead wood. On the 4th day, I came downstairs to find the letter gone. For a second, my heart seized had he thrown it away. Then I saw him outside. Sitting in the middle of the garden, the opened letter in his lap, eyes red but dry. I stepped out slowly, the screen door creaking behind me. He looked up. "Hey." "Morning." He patted the space beside him, and I joined him among the wild lavender and the overgrown tomato vines. The letter lay on his knee, half-folded, smudged with fingerprints. "He said he always looked up to me," Caleb said quietly. "Oliver." "Yeah. That even when he hated me, he wished he could be more like me. Said he felt like I was the real son Dad wanted but couldn't have." My breath caught. "What a cruel way to live," I murmured. Caleb nodded. He said he resented me for being invisible. Because he was always too visible, too loud, too much. He thought I got away clean. He laughed bitterly. "None of us got away clean," I said. "We just bled differently." We sat with that truth. The kind that didn't scream or demand anything. Just was. A fact between us. Then Caleb turned to me. "I think I want to meet him." I blinked. "Oliver." "Yeah. Not today. Not even soon, but eventually." I didn't push. Didn't ask why. Didn't ask what for. I just said okay. Later that afternoon, we began pulling weeds. It was small, unglamorous work. But healing often is. The garden had grown wild in the past months, but underneath life was still pushing through. Caleb worked beside me, sleeves rolled sweat on his brow. There was something sacred about it, like we were digging through more than just dirt. That night, I made dinner, real dinner, the kind we used to have when Daniel was away on business trips, and it was just the two of us roasted chicken mashed potatoes, too much gravy. Caleb joked that it tasted like middle school, and I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the ladle. After we ate, he disappeared upstairs for a while. When he returned, he handed me something. A single page. Typed. Clean. No tears. No smudges. I wrote this today, he said. It's not for you, but you can read it if you want. I took it gently and began. To the part of me I never looked at, I forgive you for not screaming. I forgive you for surviving the way you did. You were never weak. You were just a boy in a house that didn't listen. You don't have to carry the silence anymore. You're allowed to be loud now. You're allowed to be free. I see you now. Caleb. I didn't cry when Daniel died. I didn't cry when Claire came back. But reading those words, I broke. Not because they were sad, but because they were true. They were the full circle echo of a boy who had hidden too long in the corners of his own story. Now he was stepping into the center. Weeks passed. Caleb started therapy, real therapy this time, not the occasional half-hearted session he used to go to. He began cooking more, even started sketching again. And one day I saw him standing at the mailbox, letter in hand. Not the one from Oliver, but one going to Oliver. He didn't tell me what it said. He didn't have to. It was enough that he wrote it. As for me, I kept the garden growing, started journaling again, even signed up for a community writing workshop. I told them I was working on a story. They asked what it was about. I said, a woman who almost lost her son not to death, but to silence. And when they asked how it ends, I smiled. I'll let you know when we get there. Because healing doesn't have an ending, only chapters. Some are brutal, some are soft, some you wish you could rip out and burn. But they all belong in the book. If you've made it this far, thank you. My name is Grace. My husband betrayed me. My son hid a truth that shattered me. And somehow we both survived it. If you've ever felt like you were the only one living in a house full of ghosts, you're not alone. Tell me your story in the comments. Like and subscribe to Grace's Truth for more real-life stories of betrayal, survival, and quiet revenge. And remember, the truth always finds its voice, even if it takes years to speak.